Welcome, fans, to the fourth stop of the Rangers Ed Rivalry Tour. This is your host, Cousin Ed. I'm here with my co-host, Little Ed and Coach Ed, our producer, Mikey. We brought on Mikey 150 with his Marchand jersey in the background. Talk some Sharks with us, not the San Jose Sharks. Maybe a little Shark Tank conversation and a little Boston Bruins. What's going on, boys?
Excited for this one. I guess, are we in Boston or are we in Newfoundland?
A little bit of both. My heart's in Boston, but I'm in the Great White North.
Isn't it Newfoundland?
I don't know. Every time I say it, it's Newfoundland. It's a combination of the two ones we think it is.
We'll get there one day, boys. We'll get there.
So, Mike, what you've been up to? Tell us what you've been studying lately.
Oh, boy. Right now, let's see. Well, we're leaving next week to go do some acoustic tracking. So we're going to be tagging some lobsters and watching them walk around on the bottom of the ocean for 8 months. Let's see. We're looking to get rid of some invasive species. So right now people have been dropping koi fish in some brown trout ponds, and some of our local fishermen are pretty concerned that the koi have no natural predators, so they're getting pretty big, snapping up the little baby brown trout. So we've been after them with some different nets, and we've tried spear fishing, and we're going to try some electro fishing to get rid of them. So I've been pretty busy up here. Yeah.
You don't displace them, you kill them? That's how you get rid of invasive species?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. You think like one female green crab, right? So they're one of our worst invasive species. They're one of the worst invasive species in the world. One female green crab here can spawn twice a year, and she can release several 100,000 eggs each time she spawns.
That's insane.
It's wild. And we go out and we'll put, a dozen traps out, and we'll catch several thousand green crab. So you can imagine how quickly they proliferate through an environment, right? So
yeah, it's interesting.
To answer your first question, yes, we do kill them. Yeah.
No, I know, but it's interesting because that's a big topic of conversation. Obviously, in Florida, there's a lot of invasive species here, and there's a lot of environmental groups that like protest against the murder of iguanas. So pretty much, you're permitted to kill an iguana in Florida. You could kill it. You have to the law is you have to hit it with blunt force once or something. You can't beat it to death.
Right.
You can hit it once and kill it. So I found that odd.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people that don't like the killing. They're like, oh, can you displace them? And I'm like, where are you going to put them?
Yeah. I mean,
you just collect them and put them back in, in the Galapagos.
I mean, I know it's terrible. People like that, their heart may be in the right place, but they're very often quite nearsighted, let's say, because, you introduce a species, they have no natural predators, and they're essentially ecological terrorists, right? They can just run through an entire ecosystem, do whatever they want, eat whatever they want, lay their eggs wherever they want, create whatever kind of disturbance, and no animal there knows how to deal with it. So there's no repercussions for them doing it. So they are very often cause more harm by just letting them live than you do by actually killing them.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting, the invasive species thing. It's a big problem.
How big are these lobsters that you tag?
We tag. So there's sort of an inflection point between when lobsters become prey or move from being prey of green crab to being predators of green crab. So that's right around 72 millimeters. So the top of their shell is 72 millimeters long. So we try and tag lobsters that are around that size, so we can see how
States, Mike. How much is that in inches?
Yeah, we're in the United States, not in Europe.
72 inches.
About
72 millimeters.
Oh,
it's about 3 inches.
Yeah, it's 77 centimeters.
I hear Coach is going to pretend that he knew the answer.
7 centimeters is it's 3 inches. A half inch is a centimeter approximately.
Yeah, Coach gets it.
For the fans.
Quick math.
Yeah. So we try and tag lobsters around that size so we can get a better idea how they interact with green crab.
Very interesting. And I found the koi fish thing is interesting too. So who
this
just
helps
starts
us
dumping koi fish?
This helps us in what manner?
So green crab are one of the most invasive species in the world. They're invasive in New York, right where you are. So if you went and threw a crab trap in the water, I bet you'd catch green crab. And essentially, we haven't quite figured out how to effectively mitigate their impacts on ecosystems where they're invasive. There's several different genetic lineages, and in Newfoundland, we have a unique genetic strain that is a hybrid between a population that came from the North Sea and a strain that came over in the 1800s to New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts. And they have a pretty unique behavioral pattern that they show only in Newfoundland. So we're trying to figure out if we can sort of use that behavior to our advantage, and as well, like in terms of how we mitigate them. And we're also trying to figure out how they interact with lobster so that when we are trying to manage green crab, we minimize the effects that we have on native lobster species.
So, Coach, to answer your question, the way it helps is invasive species, like Mike is saying, destroy ecosystems. So like you can have an invasive species that will eat all the vegetation, for example, and then that affects the insects. It affects the animals that eat those insects. It affects the animals that eat the animals that eat the insects. And they don't have any natural predators because they're not natural to that area.
Who said I didn't understand? I didn't ask for an explanation.
Well, you asked for an explanation by saying, how does that help?
The explanation.
Okay, Coach. Just helping, so you understand. That's all. Just making sure. You looked a little confused, so I'm just here to help. That's my role here.
He's our middleman, Coach.
Is lobster fishing big up in Newfoundland?
Yeah, so we have a pretty cool. So the Grand Banks is quite close to the shore in Newfoundland relative to places like Massachusetts, New York, New Jersey. So our lobster stay closer to shore year round. So we have quite a prolific lobster fishery, yeah. Especially the other Canadian Maritimes as well. Nova Scotia and New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island do also. So green crab are also like shore crab, so they're very close to shore, like basically in the intertidal zone. And like if you guys were to go fishing for lobster, you'd go way offshore. Historically, you could throw a trap right off your wharf and catch lobster here. So green crab have sort of displaced lobster from that niche and pushed them a bit deeper. So
yeah, I mean,
interesting stuff.
That's how it ruins the population.
Yep, and they eat the baby lobsters too.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Yeah. They're ecological terrorists.
What's the closest hockey team to you? Is it Ontario or Quebec?
It would be Ontario. Be Toronto. No, it'd be Ottawa. I think Ottawa is the closest team to us.
Well, they're in Ontario, aren't they? Ottawa?
Yeah. So is in Toronto though.
No, Toronto's more west, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Ottawa is closer. But we do you guys know we get the third oldest hockey rink in the world in St. John's?
No, wow.
It's this tiny little barn. Like, I mean, there's banners up in it from the 1930s, and it's wild. I've skated there. It's pretty crazy ice surface. You should come check it out. You come up there.
Third oldest in the world.
In the world, yeah. It's St. Bonaventure's, I don't know, rink or arena. I'm not quite sure what it's called, but it's at St. Bonaventure School.
Coach's confusion should be the name of this episode.
I got to question that statement. I need a certificate of authenticity on that. Or something.
It's a little
Google.com.
Third oldest in the world. I thought it was invented in like Norway. How could it be?
Wow, they probably skated on like mountain lakes in Norway. Come on.
Let's figure out the history lesson later. Can we talk about the Bruins?
Indoor arena.
I'll look it up and let you guys know after we talk to Evan.
There you go.
Oh man. So let's bring on our guest. We got a special guest tonight. Evan Marinofsky is joining us.
Nailed
What's up, Evan?
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, man.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Welcome to the show, bro.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me. And Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm on talking Bruins, so there we go.
Well, first introduce yourself. What do you do? You're the editor, one of the editors for New England Hockey Journal, correct?
Yeah, so I'm the editor of New England Hockey Journal, so I do that, and then obviously host the Bruins Beat Podcast, do some stuff with the Poke the Bear podcast as well with the CLNS Media Network. So yeah, it's all hot. My life is hockey, just constantly, every day, all day. But I like that. It's you know what? It beats actually working. So I will take it. I will take that every day of the week.
Yes, it definitely does beat that. That's for sure.
Yeah, it does. It does. I enjoy. I mean, look, I'm blessed to be able to kind of watch hockey at every level, and it's good. I mean, obviously the Bruins is the big thing, but New England has a lot of great hockey, as you guys know. So does New York. New York has tons of talent coming out of it all the time. So great,
but not as much as New England. Not as much as New England.
Never
as much.
It's funny.
Never
Not as much. But I will say, I think in the NHL draft this year, if memory serves, I think there was more. There might have been more New Yorkers. There were more prominent New Englanders, but I think there was more New Yorkers. And I'm Team New England all the way. I'm
constantly outnumbered here, man. You really got to go to bat for New England here. I finally got someone on my side.
New England is my thing. You know me. New England is,
yeah.
is my
Listen,
thing.
New York's got Adam Fox claim to fame there right now. Yeah. So
that's not a bad guy to have from your region.
And what about the Bruins? Who you got from New York on your team?
Charlie McAvoy.
Charlie McAvoy,
Long Islander. And then who else? I forget who else is from New York, but so it's good to see New Yorkers and New Englanders everywhere. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Rangers
great job,
hired on
McAvoy's
sister.
Oh yes, they did. They did do that.
Yeah, go ahead, Mikey. I cut you off.
I was gonna say I was doing my homework and I poked around the Hockey Journal. I saw you had a St. Seb's boy on the front. Well done. I'm a Seb's alumni, so
nice.
I appreciated that. Yeah.
I think that was before my time. Who was it? Who was the Seb's alum that was the cover? Do you remember?
The kid's on there now. He's he's got your email on him. Ben Merrill.
Oh yes, I thought you meant the magazine. Yes.
No. I'm on the website here now.
The website. You're right. Ben Merrill's a Harvard commit. Sebs. So awesome. Sebs produces a lot of great talent. Sebs has some really good players, and there's a lot. There's a lot of great players in New England. Yep, Brian Boyle as well.
Yeah, Kenny Roach. Yeah,
it's a good crew.
Yeah.
So Mikey was telling us that you cover like all youth hockey too, and you kind of look for like any prospects coming. I guess you kind of just said that with St. Seb's, with prospects going into college and coming out of the New England area.
Yeah, that's a big part of our thing is just, kids from the U14 to U18 level, strong prospects. It's funny, actually. I was at Mount St. Charles this past weekend. They played the Junior Eagles. Nice. And you would think like, oh my God, like 14U, like what's interesting there? And there were some kids. I don't know if you guys know Chris Pelosi was the third round pick of the Bruins. His brother Rocco is like one of the top 14U players in the country. Looks like an NTDP kid like already. And he was there this past weekend. And so it's cool to see Freddie Meyer's son is another one who's really good. So, we do a lot with that. That's the big thing with New England Hockey Journal. And then obviously I do a lot with the Bruins kind of through my podcast and Twitter and that stuff. So, it's really good. Can't complain.
Well, real quick, talk about the podcast or introduce the podcast, and then we'll move into the actual Bruins talk.
Bruins Beat, it's funny. Bruins Beat I've been doing since June of 2019, which is the month that the Bruins went to the Cup final. Obviously lost to the Blues. But I've been doing it since then, and Poke the Bear as well with Connor Ryan from Boston.com and the Boston Globe. So we do that. Bruins Beat drops. I think we're switching schedules actually this winter. But right now, Bruins Beat drops on Tuesday. Poke the Bear drops on either Friday or Saturday. Depends on when we record it. But it's been going for a long time now. I actually did the math recently. I think I've done 400 podcasts, which is crazy. Wow. Which is a lot of freaking podcasts. between the two, not just Bruins Beat or Poker, but between the two. That's a lot of talking, and if you break that down, it's not much. It's not much interesting. I've been saying, but it's been fun and it's good. So yeah, that's the podcast.
Nice.
Awesome, man. Is that on Apple, Spotify, all that?
It's on everything. It's on
Yeah,
everything. Anything you can find your podcast on, it's sure to be there. So, which is good.
Yeah, so if you're a Bruins fan checking this out, check out his podcast, Bruins Beat. You can find it on all the major podcast platforms. So let's actually talk a little Bruins because there's a lot going on this offseason. I think the biggest news, of course, is the retirement of Patrice Bergeron. So I'm going to give both of you, Evan and Mikey, a chance to talk about Patrice Bergeron. We're a big fan of his on this podcast. I think all of us really like Bergeron's game and respect him as a first ballot Hall of Famer. So, Evan, you could start.
Yeah, I mean, Bergeron's retirement, I wasn't super surprised by it, just considering, like, he was close last season. And typically when someone's close, they always say when someone starts to think of retirement, that typically means it's around the corner. And I think with him, it unfortunately was. And he's been playing since 2003 in the NHL. Like, this is a guy who has a lot of miles on him. So, I mean, obviously it's a massive loss. I think that's the biggest thing. You can look to sort of the Bruins do not have number one centers in their prospect pool. And I think the criticism of the team is that, you've had years you knew Bergeron and Krejci were getting up there in age, close to being done. And they thought Jack Studnicka might be the answer. He wasn't. There have been other guys, they really haven't been a ton lately. In the farm system right now, you have, Matthew Patrice, who's really good, but he's still very young. So, I mean, it's a big loss. It's a huge loss. And I think, in terms of Bergeron's impact, change the franchise. And he was not the only one. Bergeron did so. Chara did so. But Bergeron really was kind of the main guy, I'd want to say, out of everybody. I don't want to do percentages, but his impact was huge. And I just think, he set the culture for the last 20. And I think the Bruins will kind of have that impact or kind of have that culture in that locker room for the next 20 because of a guy like Bergeron. And so obviously, it's a huge loss, but I think, his impact and his leadership. And that's why I'm so adamant that I think Marchand should be the next captain, because he's sort of a continuation of Bergeron, Krejci, Chara, that crew. And, again, Bergeron's just, he was perfect. Mikey can attest to this. Just the perfect all-around player and a guy that you just loved to watch. I know you guys obviously didn't love when he played the Rangers, but I think you appreciated when he played other teams like the Flyers or the Islanders, and, he'd just shut other teams down and then, pot a goal at the other end. So just an outstanding career. And as you said, first ballot Hall of Famer, deserves everything. I'm curious to see what he does next. I don't think it'll be anything in the next couple of years, but down the road, I'm curious, if he goes into front office management, team presidency, things down the line. So I almost don't want him. This part, I want to see what he would do as a president of, hockey ops. But there's part of me that's like, he's such a perfect image. You don't want to ruin that image that he has. Like, you don't want him to become the GM of the Bruins or the president and make a bad trade or something like, oh, Bergeron. So, but just an incredible career. That's really the best way to put it.
That's for guys like Don Sweeney, who had mediocre careers and then stepped into management and were just made for this. I agree. I completely agree.
Well, don't say that. Don't say that, Mike. What about Steve Yzerman? There were guys who step in and they become
Joe
phenomenal.
Sakic.
Yeah, there's guys that can handle it.
Listen, Coach. Pump the brakes. We're talking about the Bruins here.
Yeah, but if anybody can handle it, a guy like him can.
Yeah,
also, Don Sweeney was a little better than mediocre. Don Sweeney was a little better than mediocre.
Sweeney just made the 100 players, I think, for the Bruins.
He's
pretty
100, good.
But he's solid.
Yeah.
But I know, Mikey, I get your anger.
Yeah.
If I could interject a little bit, the thing that impresses me most about him, I forget where I heard it, was that as he grew into captaincy and leadership, any young rookies who came in or prospects or trades, he demanded a certain level of attitude to be a Bruin. and if you didn't do it, I remember reading it or seeing it somewhere, you were out. You know, you either did it or you were out. And I think for that reason, I think he'd be a great player development or president or player ops or whatever title you want to give him, because he's going to create that level of expectancy that's going to be, you know, not tolerated otherwise. And that's important to me. That's important to me in an organization.
Yeah, I mean that in a nutshell is Boston sports culture. I mean, that is the Patriots to a T. That's how they've operated for years. And so it's a great way to manage a team, a franchise, whatever. Zero tolerance, set a culture. I mean, it works.
Yeah. Atlanta Braves also. Atlanta Braves.
And listen, Patrice, keep in mind, Patrice Bergeron straightened out Brad Marchand. So I mean, anyone that can do that,
as much as
that's a guy. You know, he's a good guy.
Mikey, what's interesting also with Marchand is I think another guy who had a big impact on him was Cassidy. Bruce Cassidy was one that sat him down. They had a dinner or they had a cookout. I forget which summer it was. It was, you know, within the last 6-7 years after Cassidy kind of took the job, and he kind of laid out his plan for Marchand, saying like, you can be a really elite winger in this league if you kind of follow this path. And I think, you know, Marchand buying into Bruce's thoughts there changed his career. I mean, you know, and it's all. I mean, I don't want to get off the Bergeron topic too much, but Marchand's an interesting one. Just given when he came up in 2010, that was a guy who was not thought of as more of than like a fourth liner. You know, that was sort of his game, and then he worked his way up in that 11 Cup run, or during that season, and then obviously, you know, in the 2010s had an interesting reputation, but still was producing enough to play in the top 6 and be an effective player. But I mean, the last, you know, 6-7 years, he's been consistently, I think, you know, over 80 points, a guy that's, you know, one of the top left wingers in hockey. And it goes back to Bergeron and even a guy like Cassidy.
Hey, I'm pretty sure he has been top 3 in the league in points since some point in 2016 or 2017.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Some ridiculous amount of points. Like I saw the statistic and almost didn't believe it. It's like he's up there with Draisaitl and McDavid. Like
I think he's
kind of silly.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
I think he's third after those two, and it's impressive again. But again, that's an impact that Bergeron had that was, you know, just beyond himself. And I think you just look at, you know, I remember even the stories with guys who were waiver pickups that would come out, you know, after they left the Bruins or whatever, and be like, you know, Bergeron really helped me do this. And I, you know, again, it's a testament to the leadership. I think every organization, goes without saying, would love a Bergeron, would, you know, hope that someone turns into him. And, but yeah, I mean, just an incredible career and an honor to watch. I think that was the coolest part. It was just an honor for me to cover it, an honor to watch it as a fan when I was little. And I think, you know, for the city of Boston, for Bruins fans, just outstanding.
Yeah, I think you just said it there, as being able to watch him since I was a kid. Excuse me. You know, like when you're a kid, you watch hockey, you just want to see goals, you want to see hits. And as you kind of grow up, so doesn't your understanding of the game matures a bit, and you really, like, I know when I got older, I really started to appreciate his game more and more. And like, you're right, it was an honor and a privilege to be able to watch that for 20 odd years. Like, just unbelievable seeing every little thing he does, you know.
And Mike, you mentioned it, kind of you as a kid watching him, me as a kid watching him. When I talk to a lot of the younger prospects now, like I remember talking to like Will Smith and Ryan Leonard and those guys, and like they all Massachusetts guys. When I say like, who is your NHL, you know, who'd you watch growing up? Patrice Bergeron. I watched Patrice Bergeron, and I think that wanting to be that kind of two-way force, it's sort of, you know, it's funny because the way hockey development's going right now, a lot of forwards kind of want to be the Trevor Zegras type and be, you know, do the Michigan and stuff, and that's very prevalent. But you also have a lot of kids coming up who said, you know what, I watched a guy like Bergeron. I want to be, you know, obviously very offensively skilled, but I got to be defensively responsible. And it's not every kid. There's lots of kids who are not like that, but there's a lot who are. And I think it's also very cool to see Bergeron's impact because, like, you know, I know my parents' generation, it was Bobby Orr. You know, Bobby Orr was the guy that shaped everyone's love of hockey. Every defenseman wanted to be like Bobby Orr. And obviously, Bergeron's impact a bit different, but it's cool to see a lot of kids say, you know what, I watched Bergeron growing up. I want to be a good two-way center. And I think that's good for the game of hockey long term.
Yeah, you know,
definitely.
first off, Mikey Paducci's, if you can look this up, since 2016, who's got the, give me like a top 5 or 10 in points since that year. Because I'm pretty sure Artemi Panarin is ahead of Brad Marchand. I'm pretty sure. Just throwing that out there. Not to
Is
talk,
it? I don't remember this, but you could be right. I don't know.
I think he would. I think he would be. But I mean, Marchand's got to be up there. But anyway, Bergeron, Stanley Cup champion. So this is what I do. I
let's get this back to a Rangers podcast.
Stanley Cup champion, 6-time Selke winner, King Clancy winner, Mark Messier Leadership Award winner, and interesting. I just looked this up. He's played in 7 international tournaments in his life and won gold 6 times.
Yeah.
What?
With Team Canada. So I mean that's impressive. Just
that's
across
very
the age
impressive.
groups, right? Yeah.
He's got to be one of the only guys that has that percentage or whatever you want to call it, success rate.
Yeah, 6
I mean,
goals,
just the
7
consummate
international.
winner with that stuff. Like, just, outstanding. So,
Yeah. Well, just to put a bow, I guess, on Patrice, I mean, obviously, we're going to see his jersey up in the rafters, but do we see a statue outside the arena in Boston?
that's a great question. I say yes. And it's
100%.
tough. Statues,
Yeah.
statues are so, exclusive. And, there's Bobby Orr right now. Bergeron delivered a cup. I mean, from this crew, someone has to. Bergeron, I think, is the favorite. I would consider Chara too. I know 2 statues is a lot, but Bergeron 100%. I think Bergeron should get a statue.
I think if you put Chara, then you got to open it up to possibly Marchand, and then
They should just do a
Krejci,
Mount
and that's just
Rushmore.
like-
They got to do a Mount Rushmore. Just Bergeron, Krejci, Marchand, Chara.
Chara.
Or
just on the side, just on the
Pasternak
side
on there.
of TD
Like,
Garden. Just,
100%. 100%.
They're building
Done.
it up enough down there, the hub on
Yeah.
Causeway. So why not
Yeah.
add 4 heads just over the Zakem Bridge,
Easy.
People coming in can
Easy.
see it. It's easy.
Well, that
Easy.
core,
I mean, those guys are all phenomenal Bruins, but when you think of when you don't think of Zdeno Chara, I'm sorry. If you say Bruins, I think Patrice Bergeron. That's it. Maybe
It is
Marchand
true.
after that.
You got to think of where the Bruins were when they got Zdeno Chara. Like, the
I'm
Bruins
not taking it away from him. I know
sucked.
he was a great
He
leader
turned the
also.
franchise around.
He was
Like,
a
Chara
great
was-
leader as well, but I
Yeah.
think Patrice Bergeron.
Yeah.
Lifetime Bruin. Chara was an Islander here, there. Bergeron,
Yeah.
lifetime Bruin. To me, that's a big thing with the stat, especially with the statue. Lifetime player.
Yeah, Bergeron gets the time. To me, it's tough because I always kind of debate in my head, like who was more impactful. You're right. Like Chara was the captain. He came in, said, "I want to be the captain." Really did turn things around. It's so tough. I would probably give Bergeron the slightest edge in terms of, I guess, importance to the franchise. And that is comparing guys who are in the top 10 of all-time Bruins. So it's not a slight against Chara. It's just, Bergeron was a lifetime Bruin. In terms of statues, I don't think you would have to do Marchand and Lucic and those guys if you do Chara. I think you could somehow find a way to do both. But I think, again, Bergeron statue, 100%. I'm curious to see where they would put it. They have they don't have a ton of space down there. So you got to find like a good spot for it. But I'm excited to sort of see what they do with that. And, hopefully it's him lifting the cup or somehow maybe they show like a broken rib, all the injuries he played through in the 2013 playoffs, just like a diagram of every injury he had. So maybe that'll be
collapsed lung.
Yeah, just everything,
By the way, we got the stats in. Mikey Paducci's comes through. So since 2016, Artemi Panarin is 4th in the NHL in points behind McDavid, Draisaitl, and Kane with 661. And Marchand is 8th with 634. So they're both up there.
So
McKinnon, Crosby, and Kucherov are also ahead of Marchand.
Yeah, all those guys are pretty tight, though. It's like 646, 649.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not
pretty
maybe
good.
2017 because I thought he was 30.
I know.
Might have been like 20.
It might have been at the start of the season. It could have been at the start of the season last year, but I distinctly remember him being 3rd on the list. at some
Yeah,
point.
that makes-
So
Now
That
Evan's
makes
going to look
sense.
it up and call us out on his next
Yeah.
episode.
No, that
No, you
makes
know what? I'm
sense.
not looking it up.
It would make
My
sense
wa-
because Panarin had 90 whatever points last year, and Marchand had like 65 or something like that. So I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
that
Also,
could've
the other
been-
thing is, I'm not looking anything up because my Wi-Fi goes kaputs when I try to look up other stuff when I'm in like a streaming platform. So I'm like, what I have in my head is what I have right now. I'm not.
there you go.
But
Yeah. So we talked about Bergeron and obviously Krejci. He retired, but now you got a big hole in the top six, both down the middle. What are the Bruins going to do down the middle with Bergeron and Krejci gone?
I mean, it's a huge thing. Again, I can't. You said it. It's a huge hole. It's one the franchise obviously has known for a while could happen, and it would have been easier obviously on the team if they came back for another very cheap deal. I will say this, and I think I'm going to get pushback on this. I don't think they are as screwed as people think they are. Obviously, yes, Coyle and Zacha are no Bergeron and Krejci. I'm not ever going to say that. But I think when you look at, again, Coyle has struggled to assert himself in the top six ever since he's got here. I think they paid him thinking that he would be the future 2C. Hasn't really worked out yet. I am curious to see how that goes. I think Coyle's going to be used more in a shutdown role. He's a very underrated two-way center. I think he's going to be a guy that obviously not saying replaces Bergeron, but takes over a similar type role. And when you look at Zacha, I mean, Zacha obviously put up a good amount of points last year. He's going to have Pastrnak stapled to him all year this year. When you look at just from a points perspective, Bergeron and Krejci, for the last 10 years, I mean, Krejci's put up anywhere between, I think, like 50 and 75 points. Bergeron's a similar, range, a little, definitely more than Krejci, but similar kind of area. I don't think it's crazy to think Zacha can give you somewhere between, and again, I'm taking out like defensive abilities and things that intangibles and leadership, but just points. I think it's not crazy to think Zacha can give you somewhere between, I don't know, let's say 55 and 75 points. It's not crazy to think Coyle can give you anywhere from 45 to 70 points. I mean, 70 is on the high end. But I just think, like, again, I think if you boil it down to that, if you boil it down to, yes, there's going to be a drop in play down the middle, but you also have strong defense, good goaltending, if that's going to be the identity of this team. If you use Coyle in a shutdown role, if you use Zacha more in the O-zone, it's going to be a drop-off. They're not going to be the best team in the league, but I don't think they're going to be a team that misses the playoffs like I think a lot of people think they're going to be. I see them, again, if all goes right with kind of how I mapped it out, I think they're somewhere in the range of 3 in the Atlantic. I don't think they're as screwed, but again, they do long-term need a number one franchise center. There's no debating that. But I think for just a season, for a season or two, I think you can make do with what you have and not completely fall off. So.
I think I agree with a lot of that. I think what you're going to see from the Bruins this year is largely akin to what you saw, like, I want to say around 5 years ago, when it was that really steep drop off between the perfection line and when they couldn't find wings for David Krejci. So I think the Bruins have the offense. I think Pavel Zacha can stick it on that first line. Like you said, he is going to be glued to Pastrnak. They were fantastic together. I think they're going to futz around with Jake DeBrusk on that wing, and if he doesn't produce, they'll end up putting Marchand back up there. But whatever they do, I think you're going to see a very steep drop-off between that first and second line in terms of their scoring potential, just their offensive capabilities. I think the defense is definitely going to be the hallmark of this Bruins team. They're fantastic from the back end out. There's no denying that. Still a little short on right shot defensemen, which is very unfortunate. We just cannot seem to get a right shot defenseman. But yeah, I mean, he's great, good veteran leader, but 1 year deal. Here we go. Like, great.
Yeah,
we need someone that's not good.
No,
I was gonna say we need someone that's not Brandon Carlo.
Yeah, well, Brandon Carlo isn't terrible. I mean,
yeah, but he's got he's got head problems, man. He's been hit in the head so many times in the last couple of years. He's one head injury away from having his career done. Like, he's a great defenseman, but he's a 3-4 at best. He's not a 1-2 defenseman, you know.
Wait,
Carlo
Evan just said they're strong defensively. We just named Shattenkirk and Carlos, so that means the other four are going to carry.
Well, they had
the other
two
four are
Norris
going to carry
Trophy
this
candidates
team to a
last year.
third
I mean,
seed.
I mean, we have Lindholm and McAvoy. Like, that's not a bad 1 and 2.
And again, I think
Grizzlick is pretty good.
You look at just systematically. I think they've all, you know, I don't think anything's going to change defensively. Now against Florida, they were not good defensively. No one can argue the other way on that. But you know, I think just regular season wise, you look at goaltending too. Like I think the top four is going to be interesting on D because you know you could do a super pairing with Lindholm and McAvoy, and obviously at the end of games when you need a goal, that's a good pairing. But I think you know I understand that people are down on Grizzlick. I think Grizzlick with McAvoy is just during the regular season. I think is fine. Lindholm Carlo is fine. And then again, if your bottom pair, you know, is Shattenkirk and you know, whoever you want to throw on the third pair on that left side, I think you're okay. I think you're fine with that. I don't think it's, you know, again, there's no Orlov like you would want. But I still think that defensively, again, as you said, like defensively, I think it's just, you know, that's going to be their strength. They're going to have to, and I was talking about this with Connor Ryan the other day on our podcast. Like, you know, you look at the teams in the Atlantic and, you know, you have the Leafs are going to be a high flying scoring team. The Lightning obviously are always a threat with their big guns. And you look at, you know, even a team like Buffalo, who's weak in their own zone, but really, really strong offensively. And, you know, you look at some of the other teams too. And I think an area where you sort of have an advantage over all those teams is just, you know, defensively, you know, and I think, can you shut them? That's going to be how you beat those teams. It's going to be hard for them to outscore the Leafs. It's going to be hard for them to outscore, you know, a lot of teams, but you do have strong defense and goaltending. But it goes back to like, at some point, you're going to need a number one franchise center. I think that's the biggest thing. It's like, you'll be fine this year. And I like the core they have in place with Pastrnak and McAvoy and Lindholm and Swayman and those guys. Like, I think that's a good core. But you need a number one center in there. And I think Zacha and Coyle are part of that core. But, you know, again, if Zacha or Coyle break out as I kind of map out this year, if they do both hit the high marks of what I said, great. You know, then you're fine. The number one center, you know, if you get it, great. If you don't, that's fine. But if that doesn't happen, if a more realistic scenario takes place and that, you know, Coyle's on the lower end of those points or whatnot, or things just don't happen the way, you know, they should, a number one center is a huge thing this team needs, really, really needs. So, and again, they don't have the picks right now to make it. They don't have the trade chips to trade for it at the moment, unless you get like a Taylor Hall like move and a player says, "I will only go to Boston." Big guns don't hit free agency anymore, so I don't know. So we'll see. But again, I think they'll be fine this year. I don't think they're going to be I don't think they're going to be an outside looking in when it comes to the playoffs.
Well, I mean, the Atlantic just keeps getting tougher. You know, you got the Panthers, Maple Leafs, Lightning, Bruins all made the playoffs last year. You got Buffalo and Ottawa are better. You know, it's good. We actually last year, due to all the injuries the Bruins had, we all picked Boston to be outside looking in, and they had the best record in the league. So this year we've been saying we're not falling for that again. You know, like
I think that's the problem with Bruins. It's not so much that they're losing that amount of skill. I think the skill gap is closing between the top teams in the East who've been there for the past, you know, 5, 6, 7 years, and Ottawa and Buffalo. Like they're all neck and neck now. So it's Detroit, less so the Bruins are. Yeah, in Detroit. Yeah. So I mean the Atlantic is just, it's a beast of a division. Like it sucks to be in this division.
It is. But I also will say, like, you know, it's funny, like Tampa's getting older. Playoffs, you know, those playoff runs are catching up. They did add depth, but they also lost depth. So, like, I think they're a very good regular season team. I'm curious to see, though, if they can withstand, you know, get back to the Cup final with the lineup they have. Again, I don't expect the Bruins to be in the Cup final, so I'm not, like, arguing the Bruins over the Lightning. I think I'm just saying, like, there are some teams have gotten weaker in the Atlantic. Like, You're 100% right. Like, I'm waiting for when are the Red Wings breaking out? When is the Yzer plan going to be put to the test? When are the Ottawa Senators going to be a contender? I don't think it's this year, but in the future years, once they get a goalie, once that team sort of figures it out, you look at Buffalo, they were a point out of the playoffs last year. Now they, I'm curious to see if Levi, like I love Devin Levi, Northeast, he's played Northeastern, terrific goalie. I'm curious to see, can he withstand that over the course of the season? Is he a full-time starter? What about Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen? All those things. But I don't know if I put them on the level of the Bruins yet, just because they're not great in their own zone. And I think, now can Buffalo get more regular season points than the Bruins? I don't think that's like crazily out of the realm of possibility. But you're right. I mean, the Atlantic as a whole, when you compare it to others, I mean, there's no tomato cans in this division. I mean, Montreal's the closest thing to it, and I still think Montreal's headed in the right direction. Like, I think they've drafted well. I think that's a franchise that is going to get it right at some point. But yeah, I mean, I think some of the top teams are a little bit weaker. I mean, Florida, Tkachuk is still sort of injured, right? And then you have, Bobrovsky's been a little inconsistent throughout his career, obviously, outstanding in the playoffs this past year, but Florida is actually my team in the Atlantic that I have out as of right now. And again, I picked against Florida, obviously, in the playoffs last year against the Bruins because, who didn't? But I still think they lost some pieces. So yeah, I mean, it's a hard division, but I think there are teams at the top that have, including the Bruins, that have gotten a little bit worse.
Well, I just read the other day, I think Tkachuk, the injury you're talking about is his broken sternum from the Stanley Cup Finals, by the way. I think they said he's going to be ready for the start of training camp.
Okay. Well, then he'll be.
I think the Atlantic might have 5 playoff teams this year in the East. I think the Metro, you got Carolina, New Jersey, and then there's, the Rangers, Penguins, Islanders are all going to battle for that 3 spot. And then I don't know. It's going to be tough. I mean, I could see
the
5
East
teams.
Is a knife fight.
It is. They're all so evenly matched. It's gonna. I mean, for us, I think we're looking at it like, at least we got Igor Shesterkin, right? I mean, so
that helps.
Any level playing field gets unleveled by Igor. And you got something similar in Boston, like you said. You had Ullmark and Swayman were both great last year, so we'll see. I mean, looking at the moves they made, though, you guys are living on the 1-year deals, kind of like the Rangers did. You brought in James Van Riemsdyk, Shattenkirk on 1-year deals. Milan Lucic you brought back, and some minor deals like Jesper Boquist too is a sneaky little move, I think. So not, like you said, not a lot of room to maneuver. I mean, what are your thoughts on, is this like another kick at the can, or are they just filling the roster out? What's going on?
To be fair, this was the year of the 1-year deal. Like pretty much everyone that got signed was a 1 or 2-year deal. So it wasn't just the Bruins.
Except
but
Scott
you got to
Mayfield.
think. Yeah.
Scott Mayfield, yeah, that was ridiculous. I think that it's, again, you mentioned it, they're tight with the cap. They had to kind of be the Moneyball Bruins in the sense that, you have to kind of get guys that are going to bring you value. I mean, you look at like Dan Heinen, getting him on a PTO. I mean, I think in a normal market, that's a guy who gets a contract. I think even Chiasson is a guy who some team would pick up to be in front of their net on the power play. In a normal market, this was not obviously a normal market. I think a guy like Van Riemsdyk is interesting to me because, for me, this is unpopular, and I made this point a lot, and people disagreed with it. Like, I would love if this season was sort of see what you have in these younger prospects. Like, Trent Frederick obviously isn't really a prospect anymore, but he's a guy that we're still waiting to see what he's going to be at the NHL level. Now, I know a lot of people think, myself included, I don't fully see him as a guy that is outside of the bottom 6. But I was sort of like, I would be really interested to see Trent Frederick in a top 6 role on a wing for an extended period of time. Now, I understand their view of it. JVR is a reliable guy that you can pencil in for 20 goals potentially, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's pretty good for 1 year, $1 million. But there's just, and I think that's one thing, that's a dilemma that they're going to hit with this roster a lot. Is they brought in a lot of these older veteran guys, and they even had some guys like Greer, already on the roster, and you still have guys in the prospect pool like McLaughlin, Beecher, Lysell, Merkulov, Lauko, who at some point need to come up to the big club to see what they are going to be. And, they're all about internal competition, and that's fine. But, I think one question I have going into training camp is like, are those guys going to kind of be a logjam for those younger players? Obviously, yes, you have to beat out your own teammates if you're going to beat these other teams. But I'm curious to see guys like McLaughlin and Beecher, and I think Lysell still needs a little seasoning down in Providence. But in terms of the signings, another one that I think is interesting that might get overlooked is Geeky. I think Geeky has a lot of potential as a solid third line center. Again, that's a guy who his 5-on-5 numbers were very good in Seattle. Obviously, very limited sample size, but just the advanced analytics on him were always good. So I'm very curious.
I like him.
In a bigger role. He's a big guy in a bigger role with Frederick on his left and whomever on his right. I think that's an interesting addition. Can that be last year's Zaka? I don't know, but I do think that that's a guy who has value. And I think every one of those guys they got, or at least most of them, I think brings some sort of value. Lucic obviously brings value and sells a lot of jerseys. Those are going to be flying off the shelves, the Centennial jerseys that are coming out on Saturday. But I just think is JVR the flashiest guy? No. Is he fast? No. I mean, it's gonna be a slow team this year. It's gonna be a heavy, slow team. But I just think from a value perspective, 1 year, 1 million on a guy like him and some of these others. There was a good segment of the fan base complaining about it, and I get it. You lost Hall, Bertuzzi, like all those guys. I get it. But just for their financial situation, I think that they did what they could with what they had. I think they were very constrained this offseason.
And if people want a number one center, you got to make space for them. And you got to think that a lot of these deals have something to do with that. I mean, you're not going to get a number one center for less than $6.5-7 million a year. So you have to make space for them. You got guys on 1 year deals that, you're happy to have for a season, but don't mind parting ways with at the end of the season. And then, if a number one center should come along, there you go. And you also have trade chips. If you're somehow managed to be out of the playoff situation, you have people that you can swing at the trade deadline, open up cap space, So
100%.
I don't mind it.
Yeah. I'm with you on that. I'm with you.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Interesting. I'm curious looking at the contract situation. You got Marchand for 2 more years at 6.125. I think that's probably the line for the Bruins before they decide we might have to rebuild this, while running out that contract. But I don't know. With Pastrnak and McAvoy, they're signed forever. So who knows?
I don't think rebuild is ever really, well, I shouldn't say ever, but I don't think rebuild is a good way to describe what's going to happen. Like, they already have their core of young players. Like, it's not like they don't have to tear anything down, rebuild anything. They just need a couple pieces couple younger pieces to complement the Pastrnak, the Swayman, the McAvoy, the Lindholm. They have the pieces there of a good team. It's just a matter of having a number one center.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned not having to rebuild, and I agree with you on this, because you look at what they did in 2014, 15, 16. It was sort of a retool on the fly. You had guys like Bergeron, Marchand, Krejci, Rask, Chara. You didn't need to tear them down. You didn't need to trade them all off. Also, this franchise isn't rebuilding. I don't think they're rebuilding. I don't think they would go through a rebuild. But I remember when they hired Montgomery, the Jacobs were there, and they were like, yeah, we're not interested in rebuilding. And I believe them. I don't think they are. I think you're going to need sort of a similar situation to 14 through 16, where you take pieces of the roster. They need first round picks. Who on this roster is worth a first that you're realistic? Obviously McAvoy and Pastrnak are, but you're not trading them. My thing is an interesting one, because you mentioned if they're bad during the year, trading off guys like Van Riemsdyk and Shattenkirk and those guys. And I think that's very true and viable. If they're bad this year, I've been saying this a lot. I'm saying if they're bad. I don't think this is going to happen, because I think they're too good. I think they will be fine. But if things did go south this year, you have to look at DeBrusk's contract situation. He's up after this year. If they don't have something done by November, December, and they're, 10 points out of the wild card and it's getting to be January, like that's a guy who has value. That's a guy you can get a first or prospects for. I don't want to trade him. I think he's a 30-goal scorer in this league. I think it's a valuable piece you want to have for the future, a part of the core. And he clearly wants to be here now. But if things are bad and you need to sort of do a retool on the fly, that's a place to start. And another place to start would be like Omar. Talked about a lot this offseason, obviously, with the trade rumors surrounding him. But again, you need to get first round picks back. And obviously they blew those 2 of the 3 first round picks in 2015. But at the same time, the idea was there. The execution was not. But they also got Carlo that draft, and they had some other stuff hit down the road. Obviously, Pastrnak in 2014 certainly helped them. But yeah, I mean, again, I just think that it's a retool. They need a retool, not a rebuild. I think that's why you don't need to blow things up. You have Lindholm, you got Pastrnak, Swayman, McAvoy. I want to throw Zaka and Coyle in there because they're signed for a fairly long time. So. Even Marchand for now. But yeah, I mean, I think that, just a retool, not a rebuild, not a full rebuild for them. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good point. I'm looking, you mentioned the 2015 draft with those 3 picks. You got Jacob Zaboral, Jake DeBrusk, and Zachary Senyshyn. Right after
was anybody good taking after
was the other one.
Was anybody good taking after?
Was
Matt Barzal?
Was Jeremy Lazon taken in that draft?
I don't know, but Matt Barzal
I want to say
was
yes.
taken right after. Right after
Yes.
Matt Barzal. Kyle Connor was taken right after Matt Barzal. Thomas Shabbat was taken right after Kyle Connor.
It looked good.
Brock Besser, Konechny. Damn.
After the first season, it looked like the Bruins made the right pick. Didn't DeBrusk have 27 goals in his first season when he was playing with Krejci?
I think DeBrusk is fine. He's not the issue. The other 2 are the problem. He's fine.
Well, I always say, I think if the Bruins hit on either the non-DeBrusk pick, so one of the 2, Senyshyn or Zaboral, they win the cup in 19. I know that hurts to say for a lot of people, for me to say that, but if you get a Barzal, if you get a Kyle Connor, if you remember that 2019 Cup final, they had in Game 7 they had Carson Kuhlman as Krejci's right wing. You had David Backes as his right wing during that run. You had Joakim Nordstrom played up on that second line.
Right.
That was a lot. The fact that they got to the Cup final with nobody next to Krejci on his right side is crazy. Yeah. That's why I think Krejci's so underrated, because after Lucic, Horton, Iginla left, they basically said you're on your own, and they tried with the Rick Nash deal. I mean, if Rick Nash didn't have those concussion issues, probably win it in 2019, but he did. And you also lost Ryan Lindgren in that trade, which, again, if I've ever seen a Bruin who's on another team, that guy's a freaking Bruin. And I'm glad to see him succeeding in New York. I think he's an outstanding defenseman, but it would have been nice to, the Bruins could have used him a lot of those years. But I mean, again, if Rick Nash just didn't have those injury issues, you have Nash, Krejci, DeBrusk, and you're set. So, but obviously it didn't happen that way.
Coach,
hey guys, I'm gonna have to sign out in a few minutes. I just wanted to get Evan and Mike's description. I think we talked about it with Mike before, but what happened with DeBrusk when he wanted to get traded? How did the locker room handle that? Then all of a sudden he made this turnaround. What prompted that whole situation? It seems a little cloudy to me for such a tight locker room.
Yeah, that was an interesting situation, because that all kind of came with the COVID year. I think there were some issues with his contract extension that he wasn't happy about. Obviously the Cassidy stuff has been out there. Now you have Montgomery, a little bit more of a player's coach. I just think they kind of made it worth his while to stay. But yeah, I mean, that was an interesting thing. He also was one of those guys, I think, that was very negatively impacted by the COVID season, which, I mean, makes sense. You just think living in hotel rooms by yourself, quarantining, all that. I mean, that was the outlier of his seasons. I think he had 14 points that year. It was just minuscule, and he struggled. I mean, I think he got healthy scratched a couple times, if memory serves. So again, I mean that was a weird situation. I think they're past it. I mean, I know they're past it. I'm just, I don't think that it's gonna pop up again. But yeah, I mean, that was a weird time.
Yeah, well, tell me. So Cassidy, I noticed. Tell me if I'm wrong here, but this is just my personal observation. I noticed that Cassidy sort of had a hard time playing young players. Like he really didn't like Trent Frederick was another one that I noticed that really struggled under Cassidy just to get any sort of ice time. And DeBrusque was another one. Like it just seemed like Cassidy didn't trust his younger players enough to put him in any sort of role like a guy like DeBrusque should have been, but
Sounds
wasn't
familiar.
really given.
Yeah, Cassidy, it's interesting because I think the dirty secret about a lot of coaches is nobody wants to play younger players because it require you're going to have mistakes, you're going to have issues. Cassidy obviously, there was a lot of stuff there with younger players that I think I remember Studnicka at that the COVID season started on this, I think the second line center role and was gone after like a game. So there was stuff there with his younger, but there were also younger guys who did come up in his time. I mean, obviously, McAvoy, but I mean, McAvoy's McAvoy. I know Bjork never could really kind of establish any footing, and he hasn't really established footing anywhere. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Like there was clear stuff there, and I think again, that's why Vegas is sort of the perfect situation for Cassidy. I think Cassidy has sort of molded himself into like if you need a cup. If you want to win, if you need a guy who's going to kind of put you over the top, Cassidy's good at that. And he's good at kind of coaching veteran players, guys who can take his sort of blunt approach. And, there are obviously, Montgomery is better with a little bit better with younger guys. But again, it remains to be seen. Like, is Montgomery going to be rolling out? Who's he going to pick out of training camp? And again, it comes down to who plays better. But, is he going to take chances throughout the year and throw McLaughlin on that fourth line and Beecher and guys like that? Like, I don't know. So that also is going to be very interesting to.
It's a different coaching. It's a different coaching perspective when you don't have Bergeron in the lineup.
That is for damn sure. That is very.
There could be a lot more turmoil. See if Marchand can keep it straight. But that's a big difference in coaching because that's like having another coach on the bench or in the locker room when you're not there and whatnot.
And Montgomery mentioned that a lot this year, of Bergeron being like a second coach and a guy that he could turn to in situations like that. And you don't have that anymore. So, yeah, I mean, that's like the Bergeron that we didn't even mention the Bergeron loss to sort of Montgomery in the sense that, I mean, Montgomery comes into a locker room that's well established, that's been together a while, that has a culture. And I mean, he was very much kind of let the guys do their thing last year and it worked out. I mean, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But now, yeah, it's going to be different. And he's, Montgomery's going to have not his hands full, but he's got a clear job in front of him of guiding this locker room without Bergeron and Krejci.
All right, guys, I'm going to say
Marchand.
goodnight. Evan and Mike, thanks for coming on. Great to talk to you guys. Fellas, have a good night. Love you guys.
Love you too, Coach. Good luck at practice.
Love you, Coach.
Later, Coach.
Later, Coach.
So we lost the star of the show. So anyway, that's
Mike, what were you saying?
No, I was going to say that it's kind of rare. Like, I'll compare the Bruins to the Winnipeg Jets here. But, when Chara left, there was no doubt in anyone's mind that, Patrice Bergeron was going to be the captain of the Bruins. And I think that's largely reflective of what we've, Evan's been talking about in terms of their culture. And I think what you guys were just talking about, losing Bergeron as a coach, you got to think like Brad Marchand is the next captain of the Boston Bruins. There's no way it's going to anybody else. And I think the only reason that decision is so obvious is because he's the new reflection of Bruins culture. And I mean, I think Montgomery, Bergeron's gone, but I think Marchand's going to pick up the slack for Patrice Bergeron and to a much higher degree than many people are maybe giving him credit for. I
completely agree. I agree. And I think, I understand the perspective of, hey, give it to a Pastrnak or a McAvoy. They're long-term here. They're going to be here forever. I get that. But when you have someone like Marchand that's been here since 2010, has grown into leadership, wears the A, like, I sort of Bergeron's sidekick leadership-wise for a long time. Like, I understand the reputation around the league, but I just think that that's the guy you got to pick right now. Because again, if you
100%.
don't pick him, I think it's a weird situation that you're kind of not creating, but it's odd. I mean, that he's earned it. Like he has earned it over the last bunch of years. And I think, yeah, I agree with you. I was a little curious. I tweeted this out at the time when they're doing the farewell Bergeron video. McAvoy kind of said, "I'll do everything I can to make sure that this kind of culture continues." And I remember being like, But I think now it's Marchand's role at captain's practice, being the guy that spoke to the media and talking like a captain. It makes the most sense. I don't, it's a very, don't overthink this. You can give captaincies to other guys down the road. I think that Marchand's more than earned it for this season and for however long he plays.
Definitely. And selfishly, I want him to be a Bruin forever. So if he wears that C, there's no way he's leaving.
Yeah, I agree. Marchand would be a good Bruins lifer, just considering, obviously everything he's done. I will say the one thing about Marchand that's interesting, and I don't. They're not going to trade him. This front office, I don't believe, is ever going to trade him, and I don't want them to trade him. But it's funny because I was saying this a lot at the beginning of the offseason. Like if you take away, just take away his name, right? Take away that's Marchand, but you look at a guy like his age, his contract, where the team is, and you look at double hip surgery last offseason, and he's not getting younger. It is one of those things I'm always like, I think if you put a different front office in, I think you'd say, oh, maybe that could be a trade chip, but it's not, because he brings that leadership that I think you really need post Bergeron, post Krejci, post Chara. But I always think I think if it was another GM and it was, the leadership component wasn't a thing, that'd be a piece that you might trade off. But I just think right now in the top 6, you need sure bets, and you can pencil him in for 70 to 75 points minimum. So yeah, that's my Marchand take.
Yeah, and what he brings on the penalty kill is also invaluable. He's a two-way forward, very underappreciated defensive game, but he is phenomenal. One of the best penalty killers in the NHL for the better part of a decade.
And again, putting him with Coyle, I think, because Montgomery spoke to the Herald recently and mentioned that was probably going to be the start, or that was probably going to be that line to start the year with Marchand, Coyle, and DeBrusk. That's actually a very good shutdown line. DeBrusk has turned into a pretty solid, guy in his own end. Doesn't mean he's going to win Selkies, but he's good in his own end. He's responsible. Marchand obviously definitely is, and Coyle as well. So that's why I say it's an interesting kind of, you replace Bergeron's defensive game in the aggregate in a sense. If you roll out those three, and then obviously Marchand and Coyle on the PK because they're just effective. Yeah. So, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, so curious, before we wrap up, what are your thoughts on, the Rangers this year? Obviously, we talked about the Bruins most of the episode. I don't know how much you would really cover the Rangers with New England Hockey Journal. We got a lot of guys with Massachusetts ties. Guys went to Harvard.
That's for sure.
Kreider. So I'm sure, it's around there, but I'm just curious, your thoughts on the Rangers this year. Are they going to take another step back? Are they going to take a step forward? And kind of where you see them fitting in the playoff picture.
Well, I have them at 0-82. They're not winning a game this year. No, they're a really fascinating roster to me because you have that team has so many good young pieces, and I look at them as you look at obviously your Fox and your Keandre Miller and Shesterkin, and you even look up front, what the deal with Lafreniere and Kakko is going to be like. I'm so fascinated to see what those guys can turn into. I think Kakko they've come out and said he's going to be kind of a guy who gets a top 6 role. So I'm very curious. They're a team that has a core in place, plus guys like Panarin, Kreider, Zibanejad, Trouba, who are older. That's a team to me that, you're kind of like, all right, when's the year they're going to push through? Because the roster is solid. I think it is. As an outsider, that looks like a very good roster, should have success in the playoffs. And I think it's only a matter of time. The tough thing is, though, I think the Metro, and you mentioned this earlier, is really tough. I don't know about the Islanders. I'm not super high on them. But I look at I think Carlson on the Penguins now, adds a whole new element. I think Dubas there adds an element up in the front office. You look at the Devils. I mean, the Devils are getting really good. That's another team. Like Rangers and Devils feel like they're on a very similar track of really good young talent, good supporting veteran talent. You know, I think the Rangers might have a little bit of an edge there. Definitely have an edge in net. I think that's an area where the Devils sort of are behind. And obviously Carolina to me is probably the best, should be the best team in the Metro. Like I have them number one. And they, like I mentioned, the Rangers having to break through at some point. Like I think Carolina is due. I mean, Carolina's been due for years now. So, I mean, again, I think like it's one of those things that I think, you know, I don't know if you're going to have anyone in the Metro that's in the cup every year, like you had Tampa for 3 straight years. But to me, like if you told me the Rangers were in the cup final, I would not be shocked. If you told me the Hurricanes or the Devils, or even like the Penguins found a way to get there with Crosby and Malkin and Carlson, like I wouldn't be shocked. So I mean, I have the Rangers making the playoffs 100%. I have them probably in the 2 or 3 spot in the Atlantic. I'm curious what you guys have them at. Again, you're experts on them. I am not. But as an outsider looking at the Rangers, again, I don't cover the Rangers at all. But if I had to guess, I would put them in somewhere the 2 or 3 spot in the Metro.
Yeah, Mike, you agree with him, or where do you got him?
Yes, I agree. I think the Metro is like kind of where the Atlantic was, say 3 or 4 years ago, where there's a pretty sharp drop off between your top 4, possibly 5 teams. And then, you know, you got your Philly, your Columbus. The Islanders, like, look, they're like, they always creep up in the standings somehow, but they're never really a great team. So they're just a really annoying team to watch. I just don't really like the Islanders. It's just very hard to describe why, but the division itself is, there is a pretty steep drop off between your upper tier and your lower tier teams, where in the Atlantic that gap is kind of closing. But I think the Rangers are largely contingent on their bottom 6 showing up. If their bottom 6 forwards can play and have a productive season, have some sort of consistency, then they're, like Evan said, I really wouldn't be surprised to see them in the Stanley Cup. Like that wouldn't shock me one bit.
Are you guys, I'm curious, like, are you guys, because it's interesting, Columbus is a weird team because they got Gaudreau, but they're young. Like, it's a young team. And you look at Washington, and they have Ovechkin, and they were obviously out of it last year, but, like, you know, you still have Ovechkin. Like, you still have to compete. Like, do you guys think there's any world in which Columbus or Washington sneak up? Philly's obviously not gonna, but the other two, like, is there a world in which those teams kind of push?
I'd say Washington is always going to be like a little pesky just because Ovechkin. I mean, they're going to kind of surround him with some talent. Tom Wilson's always a huge pain in the ass for the Rangers. But Columbus isn't there. Carlson is obviously, he's one of my favorite defensemen to watch. I respect him. But yeah, I don't really see them really making any noise necessarily, but they're always going to be around for as long as Ovechkin's trying to chase the record. You know, they're going to surround him with the talent and a little bit of a supporting cast. Columbus, I don't think is there yet. I mean, obviously they got Babcock now that's going to try and straighten things out. But
yeah, reading his team's text messages and looking at their pictures and shit.
Yeah, I feel like as long as they released a statement about that, Columbus was not happy with spitting Chicklets.
No, that was bad. That was a bad take by Chicklets,
yeah.
I think.
Yeah, for sure. But I just think they're too far away. What was I going to say? Oh, Patrick Laine. I think for as long as he's on the team, they have no shot. I just don't like him as a player. I think he's kind of a cancer around the locker room. And that's just my opinion on the guy. He just doesn't seem to be happy anywhere he goes or any kind of situation he's given.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point about Columbus with Babcock, Ed. I think they could take a step with Babcock. I know he has the bullying scandal with Mitch Marner, but you know, guys reinvent themselves and deserve second chances. And you know, he's a good coach.
Yeah, he's a damn good
issues.
coach. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So if he just like, you know, grows with society, we'll say, and doesn't, you know, bully Patrick Laine, and get, you know, booted off the team and blackballed from the league, you know, whatever. I can see Columbus taking a pretty big step. They, like you said, they have a lot of talent. They also have a lot of young players that are really good and underrated. I think they have that kid Texier coming back too. So, they had an off year in net with Merzlikins and all that. So, I mean, I can see them having a pretty substantial turnaround, but
they're very similar to Ottawa.
I just think
That's
Washington
it's a great point.
Destined for it to be like a middling team, like Washington. Like they're gonna literally be like, an 85-point team. Like they're not gonna be terrible, and they're not even close to being a playoff team. They're gonna be right in that like danger zone of 12th overall pick status for a while.
They're gonna be what the Panthers were for so many years.
Yeah. But I don't really feel that concerned about Pittsburgh or the Islanders as a Ranger fan. I think the Rangers are substantially better than both those teams. But I also don't see any world in which they finish ahead of New Jersey or Carolina, barring injuries. So I feel like they were just like in the third spot. Like this, it's the reality. And we're going to play either the Devils or the Hurricanes in round one. I mean, that's the way I see it. But I could see a scenario. I'm sure if you ran simulations, Pittsburgh would overcome them with Carlson and whatever. I don't know. Pittsburgh, even with Carlson, they better score, like 35% on the power play. That's all I got to say. If they're going to do that. We've been talking about
number one goalie is Tristan Jarry. Like, I know. In what world is he a number one goalie?
I know. And then, the Islanders, we brought on the Islanders group. We brought on Sean and Stefan and with Hockey Night in New York. And, they talked about like, Horvat and Barzal, and they're going to have 80-point years. And look, I'm not trying to put them down. I get it. Like they're good players, but those guys aren't superstars. Like the Islanders' only superstars are goalie. Like the Rangers have Artemi Panarin, Mika Zibanejad, Adam Fox. Like the Islanders don't have that. They just don't.
Yeah.
And that's what's the difference is, So.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because like it feels like the Metro is shaping out. You look at the trajectories of every team, and I would say Pittsburgh's trending down. Crosby and Malkin are only getting older, and Carlson will get older too. And you look at Washington, they're trending down. You look at obviously Philly is already down. They've been down for some time. But it's interesting because, you have Carolina, which is the top. You have New Jersey trending up, New York trending up, Columbus trending up. But it feels like the top three, to me, is sort of set. The three teams in the Metro feel right. New York, New Jersey, Carolina, in some order. And it's interesting because, for so many years, the Bruins played the Leafs all the time in the playoffs. And it feels like the New Jersey, New York series could just continue to happen every single year. Just given, Carolina continues to be a really good regular season team, be number one every year. I just find that interesting. I mean, it's a hell of a first round. Definitely fun to watch as an outsider. But yeah, I mean, it feels like the Metro could end up being, a sort of the way, Mike, you kind of mentioned it. The Atlantic Division for a long time was Tampa, Toronto, Boston in some order. And now the Metro has some other good teams as well, but it feels like the three teams are a little more defined. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. It should be interesting. And, look, I wish the Bruins, luck this year. I just think it's inevitable a step back with Bergeron, but again, I won't count him out of the playoffs again. So it's going to be tough to do our predictions this year. That's for sure. It's going to be a lot of battles. Like you said, the East is a knife fight. I think that's a good quote. It is. It feels that way in the, after the top, like Toronto, Carolina, New Jersey, after that, it's like a knife fight, like,
I'm feeling a YouTube thumbnail coming on.
I like it. But, yeah, I mean, dude, thanks a lot for joining us. Really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun,
of course.
And the Bruins Rangers is an old rivalry, and maybe the newer fans out there, you guys don't get why we're doing the Bruins when they're not in the Metro, but this is one of the oldest rivalries in hockey, and it's always fun to be honest about each other's teams and poke a little fun at each other. So I appreciate you coming on. And
of course, I always say, I mean, the NHL is better when certain franchises are good. Boston, the Rangers, I even say like Montreal, like I think Philadelphia. I think the league is better when those big markets, those historic teams are good. I hate when they're bad. I hate, and I like hockey being good in the South. I like hockey being good in Vegas. Like, I'm all for spreading the game, but I really like when I can watch a Bruins Rangers game and both teams are really freaking good. So
Yeah.
Thanks for having me on, guys. I appreciate it. And I'll be interested to see what happens this year with both these teams.
Evan, before you go, I've been asking all of our guests, give us one sleeper fantasy pick from the Bruins. And Mikey, you can give us one as well.
For fantasy hockey.
A fantasy hockey pick. That's interesting.
Like, how deep are you looking? Are you looking like
just like a sleeper pick, not an obvious pick. Like,
all right.
Yeah, not like Marchand, obviously. Like just someone
could
that
be
like,
like
might get
guy...
you a lot of hits, a lot of block shots.
Jeremy Lauko, without a doubt. Lauko for sure. Total sleeper.
I like that pick. That's a good pick. I will. Does it have to? Can it be in the top 6?
No, it could be whoever you want. Whoever you want. A sleeper pick or something that wouldn't be in someone's draft board.
I will go with a guy like Charlie Coyle. I think that with Marchand and DeBrusque, I think his production will go up. I think he has a lot. Up. Yeah, I think that's there. I mean, my other would be like a Morgan Geekie. If he if he really kind of thrives in that third line role. I'm not a big fantasy hockey guy, so I don't know sort of how it all works out completely, but I think that Geekie's an interesting one, and Coyle, because I think those two have a lot of upside in the roles that they'll most likely be in. Lauko's a great one though, because I think Lauko could, if Montgomery trusts him enough, I think Lauko's a really good player to have on that third line with what he brings, what he can do, draw penalties, the motor he plays with. Like, I think he's a really interesting storyline to watch this year, especially if he plays.
I think he could be a good penalty killer too.
That is a big one too. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So,
all right. So
good answers.
Is it Jakob or Jacob? How do you say his first name?
Jakob.
Jakob Lauko. I almost said Zaboral. Yeah. Oh my God.
You guys are gonna lead the league. You're gonna lead the league in Jakobs.
Yeah. That is
we'll
true.
Never lead the league in Rasmus's though.
Yeah, like Buffalo did. Yeah. Buffalo had Rasmus. What?
Three of them.
Asplund.
And Sandin.
Did they have Rasmus Anderson too?
No, I think he was on Calgary the whole time. I don't think
you're right.
They had Rasmus Ristolainen, Rasmus Asplund, and I cannot remember the third one.
It wasn't Rasmus Sandin?
Was it Dahlin?
Sandy.
Rasmus Dahlin, yeah.
It's Rasmus Dahlin.
Dude, the freaking Norris Trophy winner. Candidate. Norris Trophy candidate. Jesus. I'm remembering the scrubs, and I can't remember the whole
thing.
That's how you know it's been a long day.
Yeah.
But anyway, thanks again, Evan. Appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah.
Of course, fellas. Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
We'll be in touch.
Yeah, that's Aaron Marinofsky. Check him out. New England Hockey Journal editor, and he's got his own podcast, the Bruins Beat. Thank you for coming on.
Poke the Bear, he said too. He was on 2 podcasts.
Yeah. Oh, Poke the Bear. I like that. That's a great name for a podcast.
Yeah.
That's a really good name.
So
yeah, man. I got a bad, I want to say I don't think the Bruins are going to make the playoffs, but I just don't think
I had him. I had him fighting for 4 or 5. I appreciate his optimism, but I just don't see. I think they're 4 or 5 fighting for the 4 or 5 spot. But I mean, the Bruins can be fighting for 4 or 5 in the Atlantic, and the Metro could be dog shit, and they could sneak in the wild card. So,
that's kind of what I'm saying.
I agree with the take on the Metro. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Metro might be, Hurricanes, Devils, Rangers, and I could see the Penguins and Islanders both missing if Buffalo and Boston and Ottawa are battling for those last 2 spots. I mean,
it came close last year,
and maybe even Tampa takes a step back, and falls into a wild card, and that gives Boston a chance to stay in the top 3. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, the Atlantic is going to be. It's going to be, to me, I don't see Florida missing.
It's a knife fight. Yeah.
The East is a knife fight. The East is no, but seriously, Mike, there's 16 teams in the Eastern Conference. Who do you think, for sure, is top of the Eastern Conference? Top teams in the Eastern Conference?
That's a tough one. I mean, the
Jersey,
Devils
Toronto.
definitely. Toronto. I mean,
Toronto.
well, you're just talking regular season. Definitely Toronto. I
Yeah,
think
regular
with
season.
confidence, those are probably the only teams you can say. The Rangers, I would say, are as close to being in that as possible without being there.
Yeah,
People
okay.
aren't giving the Rangers enough credit, man. I think.
I think the Rangers are a
obviously-
phenomenal team. I just think that Carolina, the Devils, and Toronto are just that little bit better than the Rangers.
Oh, Mikey, are you
Yeah.
in on the fantasy hockey, by the way?
I don't think so.
Are you
You
going to
guys
do it?
finally playing this year?
Do you
We're
want
going to do a fantasy hockey league. You got a team.
Get me in, boys. I'm
All
totally
right,
in.
let's go.
And we're
Yeah.
doing an
All right.
NHL league, NHL 24.
Oh, I'm out
Oh
on
boy.
that.
Oh, I am.
Remember that time I went to your house? I hadn't played NHL in like 10 years, and I was playing like such good defense. Everyone was getting frustrated. You guys were trying to get like breakaways. I was like, I was playing like position.
Playing the right way.
Yeah, I was playing the game. I was winning like 1-0 on like a fluke goal.
Attaboy. You are the New York Islanders.
Yeah, I'm the New York Islanders and NHL for sure.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Right on.
so so you got to be in the fantasy hockey, dude.
Yeah, I'm in.
Dude, I was looking the other day on Cameo. Do you ever go on that app? That app is wild.
No, what is it?
You know the app where you can like pay a celebrity to like say something for you?
No.
You never heard of this?
No.
They might not have it up in Canada.
Download Cameo, Cameo, okay, spelled
Okay.
normally. And I want you to look up Bill Pito on Cameo. He's on Cameo. He does the
For
Rangers
$75.
You give him $75 and he'll send a message to your loved one.
So he should pay me $75 to send him a message. Is what you're
I
saying.
want to pay Bill Pito. I need donations, people. So I need $75 to the Rangers Ed podcast so we can pay Bill Pito to do like a joint 150 with Mikey P or something.
That'd be hilarious.
Just have him do a video for my wedding. I'll play it at my wedding. Mr. and Mrs. 150.
Yeah, he's got to go through the whole life. Here's the 150 of your relationship. So
Yeah.
you met in
Yeah.
you met in 2012 and blah blah blah. Hilarious.
Yeah. Right on.
All right, boys. Well, this
Great
was fun.
episode. Another
Mikey,
informative
Yeah.
one.
Hope you're gearing up for the season.
Oh, I'm so fucking pumped, boys. I can't wait. I cannot wait.
The
Yeah.
season's gonna
Need some
start.
hockey
I'm
on
gonna
TV.
be smack dab in the middle of a jury trial, and right when the season starts.
Nice.
Oh my god, we'll see how that goes. But I'm so pumped for it. Just getting back into the groove again and talking about the actual games and our stars of the week, and I'm getting antsy.
Get back into the 150, all of it.
You remember last year the Rangers went to the Eastern Conference Finals, so we talked hockey.
Almost
all the
only
way
counts in
until,
horseshoes and hand grenades, bud.
No, I'm just saying we went all the way until like late May talking hockey, so we only had a few months off really. This year is just been waiting and waiting. So, all right, we'll keep you updated on the Fantasy Hockey League, and we'll get that going soon. All right, Mikey.
All right, boys.
Boys, it's been fun.
Good
Good night,
episode,
guys.
guys.
Love you guys.
Take her easy.
Love you guys.
Later.